Mashed potatoes, everybody's favorite. You will use this recipe over and over and over again. And it's really not so much a recipe as a technique, and we're going to talk about ingredients too. Because the amounts don't always work out exactly the same. Today we are going to use Swedish fingerling potatoes that came out of our garden that we grew this year. These are so fun. And this actually is a pretty big one. This would be the normal size. And they're very yellow when you cut into them, so they'll look a lot like a Yukon Gold that you would buy from the grocery store. If you have these, and if you can get them, by all means use them. They're wonderful. If not, you're probably going to find an Idaho potato or a russet potato. This is white inside and generically called a baking potato that cooks up to a very nice light fluffy texture. These are perfect. You can also use these too. And this would be a white one when when your mashed potatoes are done. We're going to use liquid, and I'm going to use today, this is milk, cow's milk, but if you can't tolerate lactose, you can use lactose-free milk. It will be a little sweeter. You could also use other milks like soy milk or nut milks. Or you could also use broth, like chicken broth or the chicken base that we've been using, or even a turkey base that we've been using in the other recipes. So we're going to get started now, and the first thing that you want to do is wash your potatoes, of course, and then we're going to peel them. Then we're going to cut them into chunks, put them into the pot, and cook them on the stove in water. And then we'll drain off the water and mash them with just a hand masher because I like a little texture in there. But so here we go. Let's start peeling and see how yellow that is. It's amazing. Okay, I've got them all peeled. I am going to take them to the sink and just rinse them a little bit. They have little bits of the skin left on them. Clean up my mess here, and then chop them up and put them in the pan. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. They're all nice and clean, and we're going to cut them up into pretty good sized chunks, about like this, because they'll cook quicker than if you put the whole thing in the pot whole. And you may think, well, if I wanted to cook them really quick, I'd cut them really small. That's not a good idea because they'll get too waterlogged. But these are just amazing potatoes. I love this color. And so here, this one's pretty big. I'm going to cut that one in half again. But you don't have to be too specific about how you cut it. And sometimes you can make mashed potatoes with the skins on. Sometimes you can make them real smooth and use like a beater. I just like them mashed by hand with an old-fashioned masher, and you get a nice chunky texture, and you know they didn't come out of a box. Of course, these you would know they didn't come out of a box too. Alright, here we go. We have potatoes in a pan. I hope you can see that. You could make twice as many of this, but I would put them in a bigger pot then. So when you're thinking about how much you're making, especially for Thanksgiving or a celebration meal, think about your pots and your pans. So we'll put this in water in here, and we're going to cook it for about, bring it up to a simmer and cook it for about 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes, and then check it with a knife and see if it's tender, and then we'll go from there. Okay, here we are at the stove. I'm going to turn it on, and You'll see that the water is covering the potatoes. You want it to do that so that it cooks them evenly. I am going to put a lid on, and this is going to come up to a simmer, and then it's going to start rattling and sputtering and sending out potato juice and making a big mess on the stove. So I'm going to stick right here by it until I can hear it moving around, and then I'm going to turn the heat down. So, but this process is going to take probably about 15 minutes before I actually check to see if they're done cooking. So, okay, here we go. It's starting to bubble up, and it's going to go way over and make a huge mess unless I turn it down quick. Okay, I'm going to check it to see how far they are. They are a long way from being done, so this is going to take a lot more than 15 minutes total. These particular potatoes are freshly dug and very firm. The ones you get from the store might not be as firm, so again, it's a good idea to check it at 15 minutes. So now I've turned it down to keep it from splattering all over and making a huge mess, and we'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes and check it again. Okay, even though I have this on low, it is starting to bubble up and splatter, so I'm going to take this off a little bit and tip it so that some extra steam can escape out that way, but it's still mostly covered. That way you prevent making a huge mess on your stove. Sometimes you can cook mashed potatoes ahead and then warm them up in the oven as your birds or your turkey or whatever you're cooking is also cooking. I just think today it's just easier to do it on the stove when you need to do them. They can be held pretty well on the stove for quite a while after they're mashed. You can just simply cover them and put them to the back of the stove, and they'll stay pretty warm because the stove is warm. Or you can put them, if you have a low burner, you can put them on a low burner and you're not trying to keep them warm for too long. That works too. Just check it occasionally and stir it up so to make sure it's not getting brown on the bottom or burnt. But they're pretty flexible, and I just like to make them right before I'm going to serve them, or up to an hour or two before I'm going to serve them. I think that's easier than doing it ahead and then messing with them when they're cold and starting over from scratch. So that's why we're doing it that way today. Alright, so I'm going to check them again, and you just simply stick a fork in them and they're falling apart. You want them nice and soft. That makes them easier to mash, and I'm going to show you how that is here. Can you see that okay? Okay. See, it falls apart, and if I go like that with my fork, it mashes really nice. So that's what I'm looking for. They're done enough. Okay. Now I want to turn off the heat and drain them. Now, this amount of potatoes I can handle with just my pot and my lid. If you have a bigger amount, put a colander in your sink and then pour the potatoes in there, because you don't want to be messing with a lot of hot water. So I'm going to go do this here. And I just hold the lid up with a little crack and pour the water out. You could do this amount in a colander too if that makes you feel more secure. Alright, give it a shake, do it again, hardly anything comes out. Okay. Alright. The water's been drained off. I'm going to use this fun masher. This is a family heirloom. Maybe you have one too. If not, they're inexpensive to get. And just mash it just a little bit, just to get it started. And then I'm going to pour in some milk. When I'm doing these in real life, I usually don't measure. I just pour it in. But just to show you today, I'm starting with 1/4 of a cup of milk, just so you get some idea. I'm going to put in some butter, and I don't often put in tons of butter, and I'm not going to do that today either, but I do think some butter is really nice, and this is a special event. So, and then just mash it some more. And the potatoes will soak up the liquid, and I'm going to add more liquid, because these are pretty dry. And see here, I'm pouring it in. Also, this is a function of how you like your mashed potatoes. Some people like them drier. Some people like them creamier. I one time for a holiday thought I would be real fancy, and I used, instead of milk, I used whole heavy cream. And made them ahead and then warmed them up again. That wasn't the thing to do. They fried. There was so much fat in there that they literally fried. The fat was oozing out and snapping and popping, and they were really rich. Alright. These are gorgeous. Okay. I'm going to put some salt in and a few gratings of pepper. You can do that or leave it out. And basically these are done. Salt. Potatoes love salt. If you're trying to limit how much salt you eat, don't put too much in, and then let people salt them at the table, and then you get that hit of salt right on your mouth when you eat it. But there you go. These are looking mighty fine. And now if I'm holding these, if the hands aren't quite done yet and we're not ready to eat yet, I'm going to keep this spatula close by so I can stir it up, and the liquid too. Oh. Can you see that? Beautiful. Okay, they're ready, but they can also be held for a while. So I'm going to put the lid on to keep them warm, like so. Move them to the back of the stove for now, and just leave it like that. If it's about 15 minutes, that's fine to leave them like that. If you need to leave them longer than that, take the lid off and then turn the heat back on and heat them up a little bit and turn them while you're doing that. So, happy Thanksgiving.